Welcome to How to Become a Production SQL Database Administrator. My name is Raphael. In this next series of videos now, we're going to look into the one of the other HA solutions, which is always-on availability groups. As a DBA, you're going to appreciate this particular functionality of SQL Server because it encompasses many technologies that we've already discussed. So before I begin introducing always-on availability group, let me just go over what is a cluster. Now we're going to be going after we've discussed always-on availability groups. We're going to be discussing the last HA solution, which is clustering. So I'm not going to spend too much time on clustering and what a cluster is, but just give you a definition of what a cluster is, because always-on works on top of this technology. So what is a cluster? A cluster simply is a collection of computers that work together. But here's the formal definition. A server cluster is a group of independent servers running Windows 2003 Enterprise Edition. So this is important because Always On requires Enterprise Edition. And working together as a single system to provide high availability of services for clients. Now, the whole purpose of a cluster is when a failure occurs on one of the computers or in a cluster, then resources are redirected and the workload is redistributed to another computer in the cluster. So we've seen this to some degree in database mirroring, where if the primary server fails, then obviously we can manually fail over it to the mirror, or we can do it through a automatic feature if we have the witness on. But this takes it even a step further, and this is why we're going to love introducing always-on availability groups and see the benefits of this compared to the others. Before I even do that, let me look at a comparison chart with the ones we've already discussed. So we've already discussed log shipping, we've already discussed database mirroring, and now we're going to discuss always-on availability groups. So here's some of the features, if you can look at them, and then we'll do a quick comparison. And you'll realize that if you have the resources here, because you do need an enterprise system rather than a standard, then this is a great system to have. Now, I personally love it, and I'm going to be implementing this actually for a company very soon. So let's look at the features and look at a quick comparison before we get into it. What is the maximum number of secondary databases that you can, or servers? In log shipping, as we said, it was somewhat unlimited, meaning you can have log shipping to multiple servers from the source. On a database mirror, obviously, you can only have one-to-one relationship. So where you had the principal and the mirror, that's all you can have is one-to-one. And if you wanted to do database mirroring to another database, then you would have to restart the database mirroring again for that second database. Always On obviously has capabilities of where you can take one or more databases and actually replicate them to 4 secondary servers. So again, a great advantage there, and we'll be discussing that in detail. Requires Windows clustering. Now, Windows clustering, again, I'm going to be talking about this more specifically when we talk about clustering, but it's primarily a service that needs to be set for Always On. So is it for log shipping? No. Is it for database mirroring? No. But it is required for availability groups, and we have to set that as a parameter. So we'll be doing that again. Automatic failover. As you know, log shipping is not automatic. It has to be done manually. And in database mirroring, obviously, you could do it with a witness server. And obviously, in availability group, we do have the capability of automating it or doing it manually. Groups of databases. Log shipping only does one database at a time. Same thing with database mirroring. You can only have one database configured separately. Here, obviously, you can have multiple databases in a group, hence always on availability groups, and they all fail together. Now, this is obviously a very important thing and very progressive thing in the SQL world, and very exciting thing to talk about. And again, we're going to be discussing this shortly. Can be used for reporting. Well, log shipping can be used reporting in a standby mode, but as you know, it has limitations because once it needs to be restored, it kicks off users. So I wouldn't recommend it for even reporting. Database mirroring, not really, because it's in a constant state of recovery. Here again, obviously, advantage of Always On, you can have the replicas, and we'll see that when we set them as read-only. Offload backups. You can't offload it using log shipping. Same thing with database mirroring. But here you can, because you can have 4 replicas from the primary. Each replica is a live database, live environment, so you can utilize it. That's the key thing. Active database is called primary, it's called principal, here it's called primary. Connection, obviously it's a manual connection, requires a secondary string for a failover. And here obviously it redirects to, all the applications automatically redirect to the virtual name, and we'll be discussing that in a second. And then lastly, connection string to mirror or secondary. And obviously here we can connect and redirect all the clients to the thing. So this is a slight comparison, and I'll be providing you with this. But as you'll see, the key thing to know is, as progressive technology started from log shipping, then enhanced by having database mirroring, and now it's enhanced even further in always on. And these obviously encompass, now always built on what's called clustering, and database mirroring is a combination of this, but this is a way advanced technology, and that's what we're going to be discussing in the next several videos. And you'll see how exciting it is when we actually do this and set it up. So let's go. So now, so we discussed what a cluster is. So what is always on availability group? Well, always on technology is a process of having one primary replica server. Now, when we're talking about availability groups now, we talk about the primary being the replica. So we say the primary replica, this is the source database or databases that are going to be mirrored to the secondary databases. Now, the secondary are called replicas. So when we were talking always on, the keyword replica comes in to designate the primary and the secondary databases. So now they are replicas. So unlike database mirroring that had its limitations that we just saw, always on features combines the failover and clustering and database mirroring technologies and goes one step further, providing read-only databases on the second replicas. Very important concept. And now we can do many things with the secondary servers that are live, if you will, and read-only. All the other technologies, we could not access this database once we had set up the technology. Here we can. So very great thing here. Some of the limitations of database mirroring have been resolved by always on. And remember when we said that it was one-to-one for database mirroring. You can only have one principal and one mirror. Here you can have one database mirrored, if you will, to up to 4 secondary replicas. So that defeats that, resolves that issue. Doesn't protect complex multi-database applications such as SharePoint, which has many databases that need to fail simultaneously. Now, you may not know what SharePoint is, but if you do, that's great. SharePoint basically, when you install it on your servers, it comes with, I think 3 or 4, or I'm not sure, I can't remember, I installed it a long time ago, 3 or 4 dedicated databases. Now, they are already grouped for this thing. So rather than migrating them or failing over one at a time, we put them in a single group, and now they can simultaneously fail over. So that's an advanced feature of Always On, that we don't have to separate these databases. We can do it in one group. So that's an important one. Previously, with database mirroring, you had to choose between what's called synchronous or asynchronous options. But here we don't. We don't have to choose. We can choose actually which replica becomes synchronous and asynchronous, and I'll show you that also. The database under the mirror obviously was in a state of constant recovery, so we could not access the data, leaving that entire server inactive. And this was one of the problems that we had basically a tremendous and expensive server basically doing nothing, just standing there doing nothing. And obviously this always on technology now has that capability and is capable of making those secondary databases, the replicas, read-only so we can access them. So that's a great advantage, and very one that I've been waiting for. So with Always On, the advantages are as follows. We can fail over multiple databases as a unit, as I mentioned, for complex applications such as SharePoint. You can use either synchronous or asynchronous options, as I mentioned. The failover is automatic, or it can be manual, and we'll be showing you that also. And then the secondary replicas can upload primary replicas with backups, database DBCC commands, and reporting. And what I mean by that is once you've set up Always On feature, the source databases, once they're replicated to the destination replicas, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 replicas, because they have identical data with synchronous technology, and they're live, meaning they're read-only, we can access those servers so they won't sit there idle. And then we can have one doing the backup, one doing the DBCC, one doing reporting, actually great. And the primary database is doing what it does, is communicating with the users. So a great benefit. And I'll show you that in a second. Some of the prerequisites before we need to work with Always On is to make sure that the Windows failover clustering services on each node is being installed, and I'll show you how to do that. We must take full database backups. This is very important, otherwise they'll fail, because we need to have absolute synchronicity, being absolutely synchronous with each database. So this is important. It has to be in a full recovery mode, and we have to have a shared folder where all the servers can access the backups. So I'll be showing you that exam. So we're almost finished with the academics, then we'll jump into the Always On. So some of the features that I want you to be aware of, well, there's a tremendous amount, as you'll probably know. I try to summarize it for you so you don't have to read tons of paper. So you at least have an idea of what we're talking about. So when adding a database to a group, obviously it must be online. Database synchronization is the process by any change of the primary database is automatically reproduced in the secondary database. And this is what allows us to keep synchronous data from the primary and secondary, so we have zero data loss. The role of a given replica determines whether it's a read-write database or read-only. You'll know that when we fail over the databases, obviously initially the primary is a read and write. Then when we fail over, it becomes a read-only and vice versa. So that's what I mean by there. As I said, the primary replica is a host the read and write, and then the secondary are only read-only, but such a great feature here. We talked about what asynchronous and synchronous means, and we talked about that in database mirroring, so I'll just let you read that. And we're almost ready. And as I mentioned, during a failover, the primary and secondary server change roles. And there are 3 forms of failovers: automatic, manual, and forced, and we'll be talking about those soon. This is an important thing also, that you can provide client connectivity to the primary replica of a availability group by creating what's called a group listener, and that's part of the process, and I'll be showing you that. So basically what the group listener does, its primary function is to listen for the clients that are connected to the primary database. If there's a failover, then it takes over, like a witness server, if you will. If it takes over and redirects the traffic of all the users to the one that has changed to a primary. And I'll be discussing that in a second also. So I think that's it in here. So an availability group listener is associated with a unique DNS name and a virtual IP address for the cluster. And I'll show you how to demonstrate that. So I think this is it. That's all we need to know about the cluster and Always On. So Always On technology, its primary purpose is to take a set of databases and replicate them to other replicas in different locations, and it uses a cluster technology. So now we've kind of understood that. Let's look at it visually here. And if I open my PowerPoint, you'll understand a little better. So Always On availability group. So what does it do? Here's the primary server in location A. So this may be Los Angeles, this may be New York, this may be Tokyo, this may be Paris. And what this availability group does is, on the primary servers, you have multiple servers, databases here. Here I have database 1, 2, and 3. Now, what Always On allows us to do, or AG allows us to do, is copy these databases and send them to these different locations, these different servers. And the great thing is that once these, now this is called replica 1, replica 2, replica 3, and it has identical copies of the databases. All 3 separate servers in separate locations have copies of the exact copy of the initial databases, and they're live. So everything that's happening here, whether it's an insert, update, delete, is happening instantaneously on these. And since these are read only, meaning accessible, we can have this one do backups. Now we don't need to set up backup process here. Essential to do them. Never ever, I've said that repeatedly, never give up the process of saying, hey, we have redundancies here, so I won't do backups. You always do backups. But this is going to offload that process on this heavy user database and server, and now you can actually do the database backups on this. We need to do DBCCs. We've talked about what DBCCs are, is verifying the authenticity of the data, and we can do it in a separate server here. We can do backups here, and we can do reporting here, so we can have a SSRS reporting system connected to this. So now we've offloaded all the work here and disseminated it to 3. Now, obviously, I've only got 3 here, but you can have one more, 4, I believe. And with more technology, I think you can have up to 8, but I'm not sure. But right now, 4. So these are what's called replicas in always-on availability group. And we're going to be demonstrating that in the next video. So again, just to repeat what always-on availability does, it takes the primary set of databases, replicates them to other replicas, and these replicas are live, and then we can utilize these because they're read-only for just things that are reporting, backups, and DBCCs. So I'm going to leave it there. Next video, I'm going to start setting up the always-on because we do need to set up the features, and these are the things that we need to set up before we can do it. So in the next video, we're going to start by installing the Windows Failover Service cluster services on each node. We're going to take a full database backup of the primary databases. We're going to make sure that everyone is in full recovery mode, and if it's not, see what happens. And then we're going to create a shared folder so that all the databases can access the backups, because when you run always on and you push the source database to the end, it's going to actually join the cluster and join the always on group, and it does that by backing up and restoring these databases. So all this becomes a little more complicated, but I assure you it's going to be simple when we're taking it step by step. So I'll just leave it here, and this is what we're going to do in the next video. So my name is Rafael, and this is how to become a production SQL database administrator. See you in the next video.